morning, everybody. Right, how do you follow the presentations that we've had so far in terms of, I've certainly found them very stimulating, but I think it all follows a particular theme, and a theme which we in the world of construction and property really need to think about and think about carefully, and that is work is something you do, not somewhere you go. And I suspect that when history is written about the last 5-10 years and the next 5 years, that it'll be described as a revolution, either the digital revolution or more likely the knowledge revolution, because we are going through some seismic changes. And we, as custodians of the built environment in all its shapes, sizes and forms, need to understand what our role is and to be able to adjust to that if we're to continue to add value in what we do. I was asked to talk a little bit about our transition to new ways of working, to thinking about how we brought employees on a journey from television centre to broadcasting house, but in fact the journey has been much longer and much bigger, and you will hopefully in the next 18-20 minutes hear a little bit about that. But New Broadcasting House is the catalyst for a lot of our activity. It's the biggest single investment we've ever done. It's $1.05 billion. Never get that right. It's been a long journey. Overbury have been part of the team who've helped deliver that. But also we've learned a lot, and what I want to do is over the next few minutes just share that story of what was originally a property estate portfolio management upgrade project, which turned into a transformation program in 2004 or 5. Because as the theme for this morning talks about in terms of how do you demonstrate that workplaces are worth paying for? And I was speaking to some people earlier about, how do we deliver effectiveness? Well, my proposition is not only, efficiency, but you also have to deliver effectiveness. And effectiveness is all about business value. And my role in coming into the BBC almost 9 years ago was specifically to do one thing, and that was to turn property into a strategic asset. And how do you do that? Well, share some of those thoughts with you, but that huge investment and that huge reduction and volume of change, I think no other organisation in their right mind would have contemplated what we've done. In that in 2004 we had 80,000 square metres of construction on site, and then we decided to do Salford as well. And why do we do that, and what are the benefits that are attributed to such? So to do that, I had to learn a lot, but also to adjust to move away from my traditional chartered surveying background to really think about the world of business and how workplaces are a critical part of that, and how the three components that go to make up workplace, the world of the asset transaction manager, the world of the facility manager, and the world of the design construction manager, can contribute along with those of us who are on the client side. And for those of us on the client side, which I gather most people in the audience this morning, is how can we understand the language of business in the enterprises we support, and indeed how can we speak that, and how can we deliver business value driven from our intelligent use of our supply chain. So to do that, I had to adjust over the last 9-10 years to do three things. Firstly, one had to become a much more competent interpreter, to interpret the jargon of construction from HVAC to BMS to BIS to GEA to NIA to square feet to square meters and all points in between, and to make things relevant to CFOs and CEOs in terms of what this means for my business and how we can add value, to integrating certainly across what I would call the three tribes that go to make up our world of construction, asset management and facility management, and to try and bridge those gaps which are fundamentally inefficient and fragmented, particularly as we move towards an era where we'll be much more people-centric as opposed to building-centric. And last but not least, to instigate, to ask the difficult questions, to ask why, and to challenge the norms. And that's been a sort of a hell of a journey, but I'm not going to talk too much about property. I'm going to talk a little bit mostly about business and about change. And let's just start with a little bit of context. The BBC has been around for a long time. It's celebrated its 90th anniversary as a broadcaster. It's had to change significantly over that period of time. And it had to do so in a different environment. And as each decade passed, that challenge became even greater. And we talk about moving from analog to digital. That's something for those of us in the built environment need to think about as well, because our world is changing fundamentally, and we need to understand what those changes are. But in the context of the BBC, if you think about it, it started radio, helped invent television, was a key player in inventing colour television, and then these things came along, an iPlayer and all that sort of stuff. And that's also changed in terms of, some people make the point that today the B, that is the broadcasting of the BBC, may not be relevant, because our consumers, hopefully all of you who are licensed to be players, wish to consume what we produce in a very, very different fashion. You want to consume content any place, anywhere, anytime. And to do all of that, you can't think about, well, we send out EastEnders at 8 p.m. most evenings. Most people don't watch EastEnders at 8 p.m. Last month, we had nearly 200 million hours of content downloaded in 1 month on iPlayer. That just changes the game plan significantly. But going back to the original sort of BBC philosophy, the Reithian principles of entertaining, informing, and educating, how do you deal with that massive amount of change? In the last 3 years, Britain has become digital. The 1,300 antennae and platforms right across the land in Britain have all been switched from analog to digital. That changes the game fundamentally, and I'll show you a few examples of that shortly. Our world too has changed, because we started a few years ago as 3 organisations: the mothership, Public Service Broadcasting, the World Service, and the commercial arm, BBC Worldwide. World Service will become part of mainstream BBC next year. The funding that came from the Foreign Colonial Office disappears, so the BBC has to swallow another £300 million worth of costs. But more fundamentally, it's also allowed an organisation which was pretty fragmented. World Service was completely standard, and standalone, should I say. And New Broadcasting House has enabled everyone to work together. But if you think about the 8 digital channels, the 10 mainstream radio stations, the 42 local stations, the 27 languages we broadcast, and historically it's been a radio business internationally. 4 years ago the BBC got into the business in the World Service of broadcasting television programs in Arabic and Farsi to the Middle East. Why do we do that? Because we had to respond to our audiences and to the challenges of other organisations such as Al Jazeera, etc., who are beating us to the punch in that respect. But culturally, we've also had to adjust, because we were very vertically integrated. We were very self-sufficient, really sort of a monopoly, if you will, the biggest game in town. A few years ago, our biggest competition was ITV Granada. Anyone speculate who our biggest competitors are today? Names? Come on, you have to do better than that.
YouTube.
That's one, yeah. Anyone else? Come on, Monica, you know them all. YouTube, Skype, Netflix, all of these players who all emerged in the last 10 years. Microsoft, Yahoo. Who would have thought it? We were both competitors and collaborators. So the game has changed in that respect. And the move to mobile devices and that side of things has really forced us to think about moving away from being a very centralized organization. A few years ago, 80% of all content in the BBC was produced in London. By 2015, it'll be 50-50. That has required a huge shift, and that was the genesis for both Salford and Cardiff. But we need to be able to produce things that our audiences require of us, any place, anywhere, anytime. So, what does all this mean for something a little closer to home? Well, in the late 90s, less than 2% of the entire estate was fit for purpose, in that it was less than 15 years old. Even the toilets in some of our major buildings across the UK didn't work. It was a disgraceful setup, and the BBC embarked upon sorting that out. And that in itself was a huge journey, because, as I said, in coming to the BBC in 2004, we just embarked upon a major property outsourcing a few years back, and had 80,000 square metres of construction on site at that time alone. But the original genesis was to set a vision for a new look property estate called the 2020 Vision. And we're 2/3 of the way through, and that has been substantially delivered, whereby we have delivered a portfolio which has the flexibility that is required to enable people to work any place, anywhere, anytime. It has the ability to support the new age technology we have, but also we're finding that it has the attractiveness of the talent, for talent in terms of, particularly in Salford, to attract new people. The 750 new jobs created from those who didn't decide to move to Salford, we had 10,000 applicants. And it fulfills Mark Thompson's dream of not only moving to a greenfield site, but to a greenfield organisation, and more about that. So all of this was on the way in 2004 when Mark, as the returning senior executive of the BBC, became Director General, and he spotted that if we're doing all of this stuff, it could be the ideal platform for major transformation. So we moved from an estate upgrade project to a business transformation program. And part of all of this was unlocking value, getting out of the huge abundance of freeholds we had, much of which were underutilised, to a much more balanced portfolio, but fundamentally to do one key thing: to bring the BBC closer to its audiences, to open up an organisation which was arrogant, inward, secretive, etc., and make it open to you, our licence fee payers. And our buildings, particularly New Broadcasting House, are clear manifestations of such, because you can walk in and come without any message, without any invitation, come and have a glass of wine or a cup of tea or a coffee and watch what we do. So it's been a long journey in that respect, but it's been a journey from a civil service organisation to a modern 21st century organisation which is open. The members of the board of the BBC do not have offices. Everybody sits